This video lecture is on population principles, so how we speak about populations, Chapter 7 for AP Environmental Science. Thomas Mathis argued that human populations tend to increase exponentially, but food production grows rhythmically. So what that looks like, sorry about that, is here is our x and y axis, and here's our human population, and here is our food supply. And at some point, our human population is going to be greater than our food supply, and that's going to equal to a crisis, which in that case is where humans have outstripped the food supply, and we're going to lead to starvation or misery. Population characteristics. A population is a group of species of individuals inhabiting the same area simultaneously. And we can talk about this through natality and mortality. Natality is a fancy name for individuals that are added to a population through reproduction or birth. For humans, we talk about birth rate, which is the number of humans born per 1,000. Natality, we can talk about any species, but birth rate is specific for humans. The other population characteristic that we can use is mortality, which is the number of individuals removed via death. So death rate is, again, specific for humans, so the humans that die per 1,000. Another characteristic of populations is sex ratio and age distribution. So sex ratio is the relative number of males and females in a population. And age distribution is the number of those males or females in each age group. So we're going to see that here in a second. Here we have a human age distribution, and you can see here's the age, and here is the birth year. So this data is relatively old, but the pyramid is still the same, and this is something that we use to talk about age and population. We have 3 stages. We have pre-reproductive, reproductive, and post-reproductive. Post-reproductive basically means you are past the point where you're going to bear children. Reproductive are the ages where most individuals are bearing children, and pre-reproductive are getting ready to move into, are between the ages of 4 and 14, so getting ready to move into that reproductive stage. A population that is a pre-reproductive that moves into reproductive is then going to increase probably in the pre-reproductive, and the population is going to get bigger. Population density is the number of individuals per unit area. So we can talk about this through individuals moving into an area and out of an area. So into an area is immigration. Out of an area is emigration. And we talk about this both for humans as well as other species. Here is a calculation that we can use to figure out the annual rate of population change. So birth rate minus death rate divided by 1,000 persons times 100 gives us a percent in that population change. What is a more accurate equation is this one, because it's accounting for that immigration and emigration. So birth plus immigration subtract death plus emigration divided by 1,000 times 100 will give you that annual rate of population change. The biotic potential is the total possible offspring. Most people and organisms have a capability of having many, many more offspring than what is the replacement level. And the replacement level basically is if you have 2 parents, then you would have 2 children, and those 2 parents would be replaced in the population by those 2 children. So when you have more than 2 children, that's when a population increases, and when parents have less than 2 children, that's when a population decreases. But in general, the biotic potential is to have way more than 2 children. As a result, the population follows this exponential curve that we've seen where the population is increasing. Here we have the logistic growth. So we've talked about this exponential growth already. The logistic growth is what we see in a population, and we break it into 3 parts. Here is the lag phase, this first part. In the lag phase, there's a high death rate. There's a lot of birth as well, but it's a really high death rate. The second stage, we see a high birth rate, and our death rate decreases. And as a result, we see a huge increase in our population. And then here in this third place, birth rate equals death rate. and as a result, our population stabilizes. This is also called the carrying capacity. So the carrying capacity is the number of individuals of species that can be sustained in a given area. It follows this S-shaped curve, and it's this top part. So carrying capacity is dynamic. It's different for each environment, but if you want to think of the world as a whole and the human population as a whole, we have not reached this carrying capacity. We're still in this very much exponential growth phase. And people debate what is that carrying capacity number. Some people say 11 billion and some say as many as 14 billion. It's just dependent on resources. Environmental resistance is any factor or limiting factor in the environment limiting the carrying capacity, and there tends to be four main factors. So the amount of raw material available, the energy available, waste accumulation, and the disposal and organisms interaction. I want to talk a little bit about this waste accumulation and how that could be impacting population. So we have our exponential carrying capacity, our lag phase, exponential carrying capacity of this graph. Bacteria lives in a petri dish, and when we put it, or sometimes does, and when we put it in a petri dish and we let it grow, it will do this. It will grow really, really fast, exponential growth, and then it will reach a carrying capacity. And then, because when we put them in a petri dish with agar, we don't add anything else to it, we just let them grow. Eventually, the waste is going to accumulate, and as a result be toxic to the bacteria, and we're going to see what is called the death phase, which then the population of the bacteria is going to dramatically go down. And we can see this as a limiting factor.